All right, there we go. So we have our last community meeting of 2019. Ooh. The next time we will see each other will be in 2020, and we'll all have flying cars. That was my understanding of how things were going to go in 2020. In terms of the agenda for today, the first step we had was like KubeCon workshop updates and just general kind of KubeCon updates. I think from everybody on the call, it was just myself and Mark that were there. What we did have was a workshop on day 0 of KubeCon, where we went through this awesome game that Scott created. And I would like to go on the record that I actually beat Robbie in the game during the workshop.
Very important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
During the...
Yeah, the game was quite popular. I was going to say, we got to figure out how to do more with that because it was definitely a lot of fun. But yeah, we had about 50 people attend the workshop, which was really good. And probably the coolest thing I think for Open Match is Robbie had done, and when I say Robbie, it's Robert Bailey, had done a lightning talk, which again happened end of day 0. They're 5-minute talks. Previously, they've been kind of, they're usually done in like a conference room off to the side. It's the end of day 0. You don't typically get a ton of people. But this year, they did it in the keynote room, and like the entire room was full. It was amazing. So that was a big kind of, welcome to the show for Open Match. Robbie was also the only one that did a live demo during a 5-minute presentation. So got a lot of, good feedback for that. So that was really cool. I thought that was really exciting and a cool kind of milestone for Open Match. Definitely saw we got some more Twitter followers and, conversation on Twitter after that. So I'm going to have to start, doing more stuff with that. And yeah, that was pretty much the big stuff at KubeCon for Open Match, unless, Mark, if there's anything I'm missing or anything you want to share. We did. Go ahead.
We had some nice dinners with some people.
Yeah.
But that's probably about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, there were a few gaming companies there, which was exciting. Yep. KubeCon was insane in terms of space and people. We'll hear that feedback a lot. Who knows what the future of them will be like, but it's definitely, an interesting event for the Kubernetes extension type stuff. So
that's awesome. April, I just added a link to Robbie's video in the meeting notes. You mentioned that we also had a video for the demo. If there is, that would be awesome to just link here. I'll also go dig up the demo steps and just have a link here, because I think all of it is in open source anyway, so folks could just try it out, or for the record, we can have links to the actual steps and stuff here as well.
Yeah, and we do have a recording of the actual workshop that we did on Wednesday. So I'm going to upload that. I just got the recording file yesterday. I'm going to upload that to our YouTube channel, and I'll put a link in the working doc here as well. So if somebody's got a couple hours to kill and wants to go through the workshop, or at least, see some of the talking points that went with it, that was recorded. So that'll be a good resource too.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So I can move on to the next point then. I think the .8, we had a .8 release. We tried to time it with the KubeCon workshop as well. So we had it released right before the KubeCon workshop. The highlights for the .8 are the API changes. So as we knew, there was instead of the old properties, we now have search fields, which are essentially typed search properties. So that's into .8. There is extensions. So we finally killed the old any versus string discussion, and now we have extensions that each component can specify in Open Match Protos. So that's those were the 2 API changes. We implemented the load balancing, the gRPC load balancing stuff. There was Jaeger Helm support added. The most interesting thing I think was not most interesting, but yeah, I think the key changes were also the developer experience changes. There was purely documentation changes, but there was a lot of changes even to how Open Match gets deployed and the dependencies get. So for example, in the previous world, all the examples were tightly coupled with internal libraries, and all of them had to be in the same namespace because They just took weird dependencies which were just hard coded all over the place. Now I think the deployment step, the core change is OpenMatch core actually doesn't have any dependency on any of, like, it's basically a unit that deploys in OpenMatch namespace, and then you actually can give it a config file which has like the evaluator and everything you need to configure it, and that's when it kind of completely comes up. And your actual core components like the evaluator and the MMF and director, whatnot else can go in a separate namespace. So the steps are deploy OpenMatch core. You can deploy your stuff, just configure OpenMatch core with a config YAML, and then you kind of have everything up and running. The advantage of putting it in this fashion is if you now look at, so the second part now, which is the actual tutorial and development changes. We've built a bunch of tutorials, a matchmaking guide, and because of this, the change to core deployment stuff, what we have now is you start off with deploying OpenMatch core, and then you can go with like, hey, install the demo in demo namespace. Okay, you're done with it. Now delete the demo. Let's do tutorial 1 in that namespace. But OpenMatch core remains the same, so you could reuse that across like multiple tutorials and whatnot. It may not seem big, but something that was not possible in the previous world. It was like once you set up our end-to-end, you just locked into it and yank the cluster and switch things. So it's kind of become a little more seamless, a little easier. What I would insist is for folks in the room to like just go try. I mean, most of the folks have tried. For you and Starly, Anish, to kind of go.
I think Starly tried on Friday.
Oh,
so
fantastic!
I was hoping he would join so he could comment on that experience.
Okay.
He's finishing up stand up now and should be joining us shortly.
Okay, excellent. So we'll get his thoughts. But I think we want to know. I mean, I think at least at this point, the core experience we targeted was the getting started experience, not the production. So there are like, I see two distinct ones, right? Like at some point you'll now start having to use the detailed bells and whistles, which still need some work, but the getting started is kind of in, and so we wanted to make sure that folks could actually do that. One side note though, we've started seeing from the issues that we've started seeing come in, a couple of them at least, is now that the getting started is fairly intuitive and that you can actually get someplace with it, we'll start getting a lot more requests for the more complete matchmaker expectations, kind of, hey, how do I do this with it and how do I do that? And the challenge there is also we kind of at TSC or in this meeting, we need to decide how much of it is in scope for core open match versus which of this falls under the extensions realm, right? Like, hey, how do I do peer-to-peer with it? How do I write blah? So we will start seeing those kind of requests come in now, because as we always expected, it's a matchmaking framework, but now that we've made it much easier to get up and running with, we'll probably need, folks will expect more. So
as a interesting question, do we want to have like a central, and actually we probably should do this on Gonez as well. We've been doing it probably more inherently. Have like a central place to capture questions that are coming in, if they're not coming in through GitHub especially, so that we can be like, oh, maybe if we write a FAQ, here's like the outline of like stuff, so we can just scale out that sort of support away from you and make sure there are documents for that. What do you think of that idea?
So some of us been coming in through issues on GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much else there has.
For now, it's all just the issues on GitHub, but I think the question, interesting question mark, because I think we have also discussed right now, like right now we have the OpenMatch core, OpenMatch ecosystem repo, and OpenMatch website, and sometimes there is almost like there are issues in OpenMatch core which are like, yeah, this is a good issue, but this is not really OpenMatch core at all. So we need to figure out where those issues live, whether it's all kind of parked under the ecosystem now, or
and people will always put stuff in random places anyway because people are people. That's right. Yeah, no, I'm also just thinking like try to unload that and be like, okay, you know, if you're like, how do you do peer-to-peer? Maybe that's a question you put in a FAQ and you're like, somebody posts that question, you're like, yeah, that's something we don't handle. You handle that. That's on you, right? Like,
So two things. One, we have the mailing list, so we theoretically could be getting some of those questions that don't go on GitHub through the mailing list. I know we don't have much traffic. Oh yeah, that thing too. The problem with Slack though is we can't keep them forever. So my goal for first quarter of 2020 is to get a discourse site up for Agones and OpenMatch.
Okay.
So that'll be a good spot also as
we're
well.
We're gonna do both Discord and Slack.
Discourse.
Oh, discourse. Sorry, different thing.
And yes, we just might.
Not D. All right, got it. Cool.
We've reached the peak point in technology where like all the cool names are taken, so everybody has to be very similar.
I just started googling it up with every chat app, so it's fine.
Right.
Can we have a TikTok account?
Sure. So yeah, we'll have that, and so that can be a good spot as well for kind of like, one, people can ask those questions in an easy place, but we also can kind of create, that FAQ type questions through that.
So yeah, with the GitHub issues, this is actually a good place to bring up this. Thank you. Do we want to turn off the issues on the ecosystem and documentation repo so that all of because currently like people like go like, I have an issue, they just kind of like put it in, or like some of the stuff we found is there's an issue, it's a documentation issue, but it's on the OpenMatch repo. So if we just, instead of having to figure out where stuff goes, it's just, if it's an issue with OpenMatch in general, it just goes on the OpenMatch core issues. Are there opinions, thoughts?
I mean, I wonder how much of this is like not fully a problem yet, and that we can actually just solve by, dedicating some time weekly, bi-weekly, whatever, to just do triage and kind of clean up.
Maybe.
If we're not getting overwhelmed with it, just get. Because we only have 55 open issues right now, which is.
Does Agonis have a separate docs repo by any chance? Or how does
they all do.
They all do? Okay. And
So we have a repo that we don't use.
Because someone has not done that yet.
No, we haven't done that yet. We're very busy people.
Oh, I have pneumonia. I can't do stuff. Yeah.
No,
Whatever.
whatever.
So we do have. I love the cough. Perfectly timed. So we do have it. That was the kind of idea, but like to Scott's point and everybody's point, really, I think like issues are going to get wherever people put issues, but like we should always be triaging, and it's easy to transfer issues.
Is it? Can you just like move them?
Really?
So it's easy to transfer issues for me. If you don't have the ability, then that just means some perms need to change.
I don't even know how to do that.
But yeah, I mean, there's a button that says transfer issue, and then I can pick which repository.
That changes opinions, maybe.
Okay, yeah, so that exists.
Cool.
That is something that GitHub has done, and I will figure out what perms allow you to see it, because I can see it on almost all of my repos.
Hold on,
all of my orgs, I'm sorry. So I don't know why. But yeah, I can make sure that basically all the maintainers have access to that. You should.
Yeah, I was going to say like pros and cons too. Like if you start getting inundated with issues and you put them all in one repository, so there may be a question of signal to noise. Like yeah.
Because like,
but you can solve that with labels. I don't know. It's pros and cons, right?
Cool.
Well, like right now there's 55, but when I look at like gRPC, there's 700. And so like you reach a point where, and so many of them are about Unity. Now, if you reach the point where, we take over with world domination for OpenMatch, and you'll have so many, we should probably get into that good habit of triaging and moving things as needed.
So I
will fix that.
I found the transfer issue button. I do have it.
Okay, cool.
Just
then
not where I expected the button to be. So.
Well, you can file an issue with GitHub for that. Does everybody, if everybody else will just check and make sure, Caleb, I know, Saurabh, you probably I don't know if you're logged into GitHub right now, but it doesn't have to be right this moment, but let me know if you don't see it.
Sure.
It should be, when you're looking at an issue, it's the participants, there you go. And then underneath it, the lock conversation, pen issue, transfer, and delete.
Yep, I got it.
So, sweet.
Fancy.
All right, I have taught you all something today. I'm out. I'm done.
Cool.
There's a lot of new issues.
Next up, community updates. Caleb?
Oh, sure. So we have a beta matchmaker that integrates with our game server hosting that has been. Oh, there's Starly. Hey, Starly. Starly will also give an update in a second, since I'm ambushing him as soon as he joins the meeting. But we have started the process of taking what was effectively an early product beta, and as of last Friday, we started. We've already integrated .6 previously and had that kind of on hold so that we could launch. We're now at .8. .8 looks really great, and I think Starly went ahead and just did it on Friday just to get started. Our entire next 2 weeks between us specifically are dedicated to getting at least feature flag implementations that we can have both our beta product as well as the open match based one integrated. So I know that Starly actually went through the docs as a task last sprint, and I think even approached getting them integrated. Starly, do you want to just comment on how that went and your progress and experience?
Went pretty well. The doc is like concise, but at the same time, it explains very well what needs to be done to like set up the full matchmaker. So from that point, it was pretty good. And afterwards, integrating with our product was also like a bit challenging at the beginning because of working with protobufs, and it's trickier with C# than it is with Go to integrate all that. But afterwards, it was pretty good.
And so you mentioned that you had actually gotten this into an environment.
Yeah. We have it deployed in a namespace where like both our own beta and open match is running in parallel. So yeah, it's a matter of now testing out the functionality from our point of view, because we have some features that are not implemented on our side. But yeah, it's pretty.
Did you get CI/CD running for our testing? No.
Not yet.
Okay. So in 2 weeks we'll have hopefully we're gonna have environment deployed matchmaker that we can point our integration tests against, so that's parity for us.
Sure.
But also we have our stress client and stress orchestrator that I think would be very interesting to point against it, because that's probably the biggest gate for us for actually throwing in our release notes. Open Match has replaced the core. Welcome to a world where Open Match runs your matchmaking. So
Perfect.
That'll be very exciting when we get out its release notes. The hope is that we'll have at least a clear path to get there. At which point, like, we're open to starting to pull off issues and adding contributions where we need for reliability and stability purposes.
Perfect. Awesome.
I think that's it from the Unity side. Positive direction. Kind of was hoping we'd have something today, but when we went beta, the world sort of explodes, right? So things are now calm again, and we can focus on this.
Sure. Awesome. Cool. Thanks for the update. Ish, I don't want to put you on a spot, but do you have anything to share? Maybe not.
You're muted if you're trying to talk.
There we go.
There.
Now it's just no audio. I don't know if you meant to mute us.
Maybe we can come back.
Okay.
If we hear anything from him, or maybe he's pinging me here. No. Okay. So I'll quickly go over the .9 plan. So I think now that .8 is behind us, we are already in .9. We've spent the week just trying to kind of hammer down the GitHub issues. So I think there is enough there. But I just kind of from a core theme perspective, I think there are a few things we are tackling in .9. One is when I keep saying API lockdown. So every release there is slightly more API changes. The nature of the changes this release is likely going to not be anything like breaking, but it's going to be minor improvements to like, hey, an assignment, we are passing error instead of status and stuff like that. So it's just refining that. One of the things we, Scott was posing was like, we've tried to rename the surfaces for a while. Like Logic still is around, so maybe this is a good chance to finally agree on better names. And,
Great.
So stuff like that, which is not really concerning API changes, but things we just need to do to clean up before we get to 1.0. So there are proposals for that we can go, but from a core theme perspective, there is a set of things there. There are some core synchronizer issues and basically optimizations in some of the core components. So those are some things. Scale, again, I think what I mean by scale is scale is like a never-ending thing. We've tried to do some experiments in .8. We found issues with gRPC load balancing, etc. We fixed them. Now I think this time I expect more from like, as you folks dial into it, you will start seeing some things and we'll discover issues based off of that. So it's not that there is specific work carved out, but from our perspective, I think there is scale benchmarking that needs to be done, which is just for some scenarios, we come up with recommendations and what are the numbers we know we support today. But I think it's this is one place where we need help from the community as well, because we want to make sure that folks who are really planning to get onto this in the next quarter or so actually have some scale input for us to see if things are trending in the right direction and if they see things just fail over or whatnot. I mean, now that the experience is behind us, basically these are kind of the productionization things that we want to get to, where if I have to just give a one-liner for the core theme, it's to make sure that somebody can actually stand a production matchmaker behind this, right? So effectively all these try to line up towards that, where there's stabilization, reliability, API lockdown, scale, whatnot. But there is a lot more. We actually have taken a stab at triaging the .9 issues on GitHub from all the issues currently present. So I don't want to go over all of them right now, but offline, folks should just take a look at it. More importantly, for anything that we aren't prioritizing for .9, if you think that should be prioritized, please bump that up. But for now, we have taken a stab at it. So you'll see updated milestones tags on that. One quick note again on prioritizing, what I've done is for .9, and we have put .1.0, not 1.0, there is .9, .10, and 1.0. So I think the way I've bucketed those is everything we think is great from productionization perspective, but doesn't block anybody immediately is on the 1.0 roadmap. Everything we think is critical right now to get to like a stable production is .9. And .10 is kind of the in-between stuff, which is like start service and things we have spoken of, which we know we need, but at the same time, there's no burning need right now to get to them. So anyway, just look at the prioritization, give your thoughts, leave comments on things which you think are misprioritized, and if there is something completely missing. So that's where we expect folks to pitch in and align with the current plans. But that's that. Anything else I'm missing there, Scott?
I've been on vacation, but that sounds right.
I think the one thing I'll add is the ecosystem stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things, and I haven't listed out here explicitly because that doesn't exactly align with core OpenMatch, but again, we've noticed that now there are examples, there are scale tests. I kind of alluded to this a little bit in the last meeting as well. If you look at OpenMatch repo, there's a lot of stuff in there which is not core OpenMatch, but just stuff in the periphery. With the KubeCon demo, we had more director and came front end and such samples. So Scott had the idea of like just creating a separate repo for these. He's figuring out the details around the tricky parts to be answered around like, how do you keep mapping between like, what's the release schedule for ecosystem repo like? Is there even one, or is it just components have alignments with like specific releases for OpenMatch? So those are the things we need to figure out, but I think the intent is to split out things that are not core OpenMatch into a separate repo. And that would also, it's not just to split out the current components. I think that will open the doors for a lot of you folks want to contribute some match functions to open source. Where do they go? I mean, in OpenMatch core today, we'll scratch our heads to figure out a right structure for it. If there's an ecosystem repo, we could have it independent folders. But I think that's something which is very nascent. So I would expect Scott to come up with like a proposal, share it. We don't need to wait for the next community meeting. We can just have like a one-pager out in the open about what we plan to do with it, and you folks can contribute to it and let us know. What do you think?
It feels like a place to be maybe less rigorous than we've had to be.
Yes.
With the main.
Yeah. So the current idea is that at the top level, there's folders for different projects.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have a new project, you just create a new top level folder.
Yeah. Okay.
And so if anybody goes, hey, I want to do some peer-to-peer director thing, you go, cool. Put it in the directory there. Like, it's not going to go in core OpenMatch. You're not going to pollute us. You're in charge of keeping it up to date with the current version of OpenMatch. Go have fun with it. Kind of thing.
That's fantastic. Sounds really great. We should maybe take a beat to carve off to try and get something contributed to that. And maybe even just a high level version of like what our architecture was. It might be like, if someone wants to read how they might be able to do that, documenting that and putting that as like a
Super useful.
we can link to it as a story, like a success type thing. But yeah, seems interesting. Okay. Charlie and I need to go read the roadmap stuff and figure out how we land there. So
Cool. The reason I've listed Cyanix and Unity here is because I'm expecting through .9 there to be a lot more interaction around a lot of .9 stuff will also come from the issues you folks hit while you try to come on board, and same goes with Ish. We've been having syncs with him bi-weekly to kind of see what issues he's hitting, and so I think that's where that comes into .9. From a release dates perspective, I think right now, and this is super tentative, we haven't had a chance to kind of lock this internally, but I think from what a stab we took, again, 6 weeks, we are trying to get to the cadence that we had before, and with the holidays and stuff, if you give it a week of break, that lines up somewhere in the middle of January. That's when we are trying to land .9. That's kind of where it is right now. We can again follow that model of just prioritize the issues, because this hasn't been considering how long does it take to finish all the current issues marked .9. So what we can do is either see how critical those issues are and adjust the date, or we can just see, hey, it's a train model, whatever fits into .9, we just lock down .9 at that point and kind of move on. So we have had discussions internally around the importance of shipping at a regular cadence. And actually we have been close to, if you track the past, .6 was the longest, but after that, the .7, .8 have been in the ballpark.
.6 was a huge overall.
Yeah, exactly. But both of the other ones have been 7-8 weeks. We are getting there. So
cool. Yeah, that lines up really nicely, actually.
Cool. That's it from me.
Can you guys hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Oh, hey, I did it. I'm a genius. It only took me 20 minutes. Hey guys, yeah, I'm at home today and my microphone, I don't know, did not want to play nice. So quick update from us. We haven't really done a whole lot of work on OpenMatch in a little bit. Basically, I'm essentially feature complete in terms of hooking it up to Rocket League and everything. The one issue that's blocking us is that it doesn't quite scale to our load currently. And I know Sarab already said we're trying to work through that, but basically that's our main thing is there's not a whole lot for me to do until we get that piece resolved. So
I think one of the things I wanted to check was, I remember we had a conversation around backfills, and we had some suggestions. We are right now, I think we're thinking of brainstorming around how to do that and come up with recommendations and stuff. And right now you're planning on using is your current plan to use a profile each backfill?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's I think where from the scale perspective, the most interesting thing comes in, because I expect when we discuss with you folks, to give context on Ish's scaling challenges, right? I think
tens of thousands of match function runs scheduled, right?
And it's not even, except it's not just match function runs, it's even the different profiles that we are querying. But basically, that's what it amounts to. Yeah. So
I'm assuming that we landed on the same thing that we've been thinking about, which is that backfill is a ticket.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
That drastically moves it into what OpenMatch is better at.
Yeah.
Which is not tens of thousands of matches, create hundreds of thousands of matches. It's hundreds of match things, are able to generate lots of.
So at this point, I think where we are at a ballpark is we tried and we went past 500 concurrent profiles pretty smoothly, which again, exactly from your use case perspective, I think that seems like, okay, you're already past a good number.
We already had someone try to go to 10,000 also. So.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. we I think when we were at 1,600, we started seeing some issues. So we are trying to work our way through it.
Assuming those were database contention, right? Those were read contention?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So.
Okay. And that's with multiple query API boxes and several
basically, right? So
Redis
each
read machines.
Yes. So each one is generating multiple requests, and each one is basically pounding the database with. So you have lots of queries backlogged at each one. So the question is,
You rewrote the database, right? Nothing.
I want to rewrite the database.
I know
I
you
have to
do.
justify myself spending time to rewrite the database.
I
Or
think
actually just write a database.
If you could just submit that as a formal amendment to the Constitution that you need to write that and get that through the subcommittees, then then we can write our own database. MatchDB.
I think what we would need to really do in .9 timeframe is basically try to define what scaling dimensions we plan to scale on, what the recommendations there are, and just draw the boundaries. And based off of that, so I think I was talking to you, Fawn, and this scale we are speaking of is just scaling the number of profiles, right? But I think there is scaling the number of tickets coming in and scaling the number of actual matches being generated from the backend, the assignments. There are different dimensions to it, and we need to explore where we are with those, and then come up with like, okay, for profiles, how much do we expect us to realistically scale? And if what we have currently is just not acceptable, then we should consider rewriting the database, or not rewriting the database, but at least have like a different plugin for like, okay, if you really want to scale to a certain number, here's your trade-offs, but then you can use this in-memory filtering mechanism where you just skip Redis completely.
Yeah, I mean, there's three vectors to this, right? One is what is a way to do backfill at high server concurrency, which arguably it sounds like we're kind of in the direction of one way to do it is to make it a special kind of ticket that already has connection information.
Yes.
And then your match profiles, your schedule need to kind of understand, fill this pool, and then make new ones, right? Okay, that's one. The second one is just the concurrency around the functions, and the last one is the number of tickets that we're actually working with. We've done 100,000 concurrent tickets, and it wasn't the database. We were at like 30% towards contention.
Okay.
So but that was on our system, which doesn't have high availability Redis.
Sure.
So when we get to OpenMatch at the end of this, one of our focuses for .9 should be getting those figures.
Yeah.
So that's something we can help with.
Perfect. I think that's where I'm looking for input from you folks as well, which is basically try to put your load tests in here and give us some observations around what you see, and that way we know how much more to invest.
Absolutely.
But yeah. But so yeah, .9 is all about these kind of things.
I realize I cut you off, Ish.
Sorry.
Finishing up your update.
No, that was basically it. I mean, I think that's where our focus is now, is just figuring out where OpenMatch will scale to, and then I guess adjusting our solution to fit underneath that scale.
So in the context of having every game server basically runs its own function, is there an opportunity here? I'm trying to figure out how to help, right? Because like maybe there's something we could do where we could have an API that sort of like wraps the context of a ticket for a backfill, and try to like have a pattern that's like a back-end based filling pattern in order to kind of like allow this type of direction, just to unblock Ish and their scale needs. At the same time, though, I'm not sure there's a way to do it without having you guys specifically take on some changes to the way you're doing your backfill.
Yeah, I mean, that could be useful. I mean, I guess from my perspective, kind of on the original design of this whole thing, like from our end, was that like, yeah, you can make as many profiles as you want because they just all run concurrently in separate containers and it doesn't matter, right? So that was kind of our understanding from the beginning. It was just like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter how many profiles you have, like they all run concurrently, so this is fine. And I think we didn't expect to run into so many issues with just having, say, 5,000 profiles.
Yeah, around .4, I know that we kind of started to, from the Unity side, we need to return more than one proposal from a profile or match from a profile, because it really seemed useful to not have to reload the whole container context in order to do something. So that begged for the need of a service, and then it was like, well, we're here, why not make more matches because we have added context. And I think around that point, we started heading in the other side, which is the ticket. Our backfill solution is the same actually at the moment, but we have immediate plans to start advising people to do the ticket-based route, because the concurrency model does not support.
Yeah.
If you've got 10,000 servers, every single one of those trying to do every second or every 3-second reads on a database, especially one that has like consistency requirements, is going to be. It seems like it should scale, but every single one of those reads is a query, and so the queries are very expensive. And I don't know if the original design of one server per profile run is tenable for scale.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely hear you on that
I
one.
mean, if this is an issue, it gives me more freedom to go and try to get
But the ticket side, it seems like a reasonable way to.
Yeah.
It seems like the easiest way forward.
yeah, maybe.
I think that's that. Yeah.
Open to hearing about this though. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No. It's nothing that I have prepared to talk about. But we can distribute. We can do a more of a push model to the MM logic of here's all the ticket data, and that would scale in greater dimensions.
If you're interested in this, we do have an in-memory implementation that does ticket queries in an optimized way. It basically does kind of what Redis does, but like
Just in memory.
Right.
in memory.
I've done that too
Yeah.
at one point, but
Well,
it's code rotted at this point. But
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I almost feel like there are trade-offs both places, and what I feel like is it depending on what trade-off you want. I mean, if we could a model we could go with is like that the database, essentially the state store becomes like a plugin model where if you are okay with a single server in memory everything, then just swap, hey, here is the state store model and here is how you go use it, and at that point you do get the really high concurrency, but what you're trading off at that point is sure you're trading off consistency or availability essentially. Things could go down,
It's
and
not clear that it solves the concurrency problem, especially a single box state store. It
Yeah,
seems like
again.
you need distributed memory states, or you need Redis, but Redis that understands better queries.
Yeah.
You need Mongo's website. So
again, so I think there is the work is to find a balance between what's the recommendation and if that's reasonable, and if not, then go back and change the state store layer.
one thing we can do, maybe not in the next 2 weeks, but the 2 weeks following the holiday weeks, because that's maybe more thoughtful time
Sure.
than it is time spent making true code progress. Guidance around backfill and existing server and trickle model seems like something we actually have an imminent need to try to resolve, at least from a guidance perspective.
Yeah.
If that comes out in the form of a technical requirement on our service to understand how to like create a special kind of ticket, and we realize this is like a universal problem, maybe actually either developing guidance or even that special kind of ticket concept might be worth pursuing. I will say OpenMatch as a framework, we've started adding quality of life improvements to the framework around things like extensions and search queries. So maybe this is another such promotable field. So something to think about.
I know way back in .4, the backfill solution was basically the ticket solution, which is backfill servers are just weird tickets or tickets with like added stuff on them. So we have gone that route before. So I'm certain it certainly can be done. It certainly works. It was just nice to have, like this is a profile, it comes back with one game, and here you go.
Yeah, the really tricky part with the paradigm shifting from I'm a server and I know what I need, I'm going to reach into the pool of players and extract it, is harder to do than, hey, I'm a server and I know this about myself, and then something function is going to load 1,000 of those and then
Just fill in the gaps. Right?
yeah, it's trickier because like if you really want to do like the needs of those 1,000 servers doing backfill might be different. It might actually be the entire pool of tickets. And so at that point, it's hard. You kind of want something that says, hey, I'm going to find these 100 that are like, and I'm going to process those with one query or two queries and try to like have a N to M high ticket to low query count, right? Yeah, definitely an interesting problem. There's nothing stopping you from loading the entire like ticket memory, database into memory for the purposes of one run. It feels like at that point you should pursue Scott's model of
Just everything just stays in the memory.
everything just stays in memory.
I am curious.
Match functions have consistent memory. There we go. That's what we need.
You mentioned trickle matchmaking.
Mhm.
Is that something that you're seeing a lot of people wanting to do, or?
First, we should synchronize on terminology. What did you mean by trickle matchmaking?
Trickle matchmaking is kind of like, it's a more backfill centric matchmaking. And so like it's a spectrum, right?
Right.
You could already have servers like in
Yeah.
an MMO and people just land on them
Yep.
versus having players and have no servers, then you need to allocate.
Mhm.
In the trickle-in model, you might also have intermediate servers that are like lobby servers. So you matchmake into a lobby server, you don't have a game server running, but you have like a chat server that can host more players than a typical server. So they're alive longer and host sessions. And then, or like an activity host server. I know there's a lot of games that have, they're technically session-based, but they look like MMOs because they use bubble-based maps. So you can you go through a long hallway and you go out the other side and it's one map, but you actually did matchmaking while you were running across. Okay, well that instance is like up and doing backfill. And so the instance might have like a 5-minute death timer on it or something like that, right? Kind of like game server hosting, but a little more persisted. Requires a little more work, and the matchmaker is kind of the workhorse of that world where you're just like, I exist, sort of advertising, but also like the state of me has changed. Someone moved this chair, so like if you have players who are looking for that chair not having been moved, then I'm not for you, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that what you were thinking of?
It answers my questions.
Great.
I think that's one of the areas we were thinking of trying to give recommendation again as well in, because I think one of the things we've seen, just a similar point, is like a matchmaking where you have a lobby and you have one player come in and two come in, and from an experience perspective, you have things filling in, like players waiting for.
You play
others.
Splatoon.
I don't play Splatoon.
Okay, yeah, no, okay.
Is there a game that Splatoon is like? Is it like Rocket League? I don't know.
No,
I feel like
the
it's
matchmaking
not.
of like
Otherwise,
you say I want to find a game, and it like puts you into like you see like, oh, there's two other people who are waiting, and then you see people fill in, and then when you get to 8, like it says, okay, you have a game now. And I think our recommendation there was you probably don't want to do that because you're locking yourself into a match before you need to be. But we're not quite sure on.
There's a way to do it with this matchmaking system.
So
you still need this, regardless of how you're going to do that part.
Yeah.
We could bring something like that part in, but then that requires stateful session type stuff.
The question is, there is a way to do it, but is that like with the open match model of we have a pool, we need 8, we can figure out multiple combinations of putting this together and find the best 8. Does that kind of line up well? So if you were building a matchmaker from scratch or designing your matchmaking experience from scratch, would that be something you would actually recommend using OpenMatch at all, like that experience of trickle matchmaking?
Oh,
or
sure.
That's the question.
Yeah, but I mean, it would be. I would need to know either information about like basically I need some stateful thing that's keeping track of what exists.
Sure.
So some tickets have gone through the system and already been linked. Those become like a join ticket.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the join ticket can exist outside of OpenMatch. So the join ticket comes back in
As a single.
and now I have tickets and join tickets and I can match those together.
Yeah.
And eventually like the people who are in the join ticket are already offloaded to an experience that they're sitting in. And in fact, that's what we see a lot of folks do is they write a lobby service or I call it pregame lobby specifically because there's different things, but pregame lobby is you're sitting waiting for the game to start and you're voting on the map. So there's custom game logic you have to run. You can only select one fighter each and you can't select the same fighter. So there's more, authoritative game logic. And at a certain point, the timer runs out and the match looks good. But then a player quits, so you got to go back in. And, it's Halo 3 is the one I think of where like you have a little avatar sitting there, and then when someone joins in, their name gets populated, and eventually it's like you're good.
Sure.
and then that allocates a game server and offloads it and makes itself available for another set of people. Yeah. But yeah, seems like a really cool thing that should exist around, outside
It's
of
like
also,
outside of Open Match. But
yeah.
cool. Anything else? No. I think for the next community meeting, the original time overlaps with the holidays. So either we could, again, the rescheduled time will be still again overlapping with holidays because it's actually January 1st, I think, 1st or 2nd. So either we just put this to second week of January or wait till the end of January and skip the next one. We can maybe even decide at one time, but I don't have an opinion. I don't know what you folks think.
How about the second week of January?
Let's do it.
I was gonna say it's usually good before a release.
Okay.
So
Let's-
the other question I had was like, and I want to check with everyone in the community, but like I wanted to check on time, if this is a good time, if not. So I'll do like a little poll or something in the Slack. But we can look at second week of January and hopefully a good time for all in the globe.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody
See you.
have anything else they want to share?
Die 9 sounds super great.
We're gonna do TSC and dive into some issues like now.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, after this closing the community meeting, we're now gonna move into
TSC.
TSC meetings. Does that switch
Yeah, that switches.
recordings? So everything switches.
Everything switches.
Okay.